Let's talk about Elon Musk trying to buy Twitter. And I don't know what he's actually really trying to do. All I know is what he has said he's trying to do. What I'm going to do is tell you what Twitter and other US-based social media platforms actually are versus what people think they are, and what apparently Elon Musk thinks they are. I'm going to explain why this is going to be much more complicated than it initially looks. And I'm going to give you some background information on Twitter and Facebook. They are two super weapons in the United States' arsenal for information warfare. That is what Twitter and Facebook are. They're not just private corporations. They're connected directly to the government and all of the corporations that have all of this unwarranted influence over the US government. I'm going to go over how they have used this influence, this power, over Twitter and Facebook, and how they have basically weaponized what should be social media. Social media being media created by and for the people using the network, and how they're trying to take that and bring it all the way back to just regular programmed media. Like when you turn on the TV, there is a single message that you will be told, and if you don't like it, your only choice is to just turn it off. So anyway, let's get into this. Let's go to this article, The Hill. How an Elon Musk-led Twitter could change social media. Elon Musk's bid to buy Twitter could change the social media landscape if the billionaire follows through on his stated intention to transform the platform. How is he going to transform it? By creating a Twitter with fewer content moderation policies. And content moderation policies is just a euphemism for censorship. That's what Twitter has been doing. They are censoring people who in no shape, form, or way violated the terms of service. Just people who are getting in the way of US foreign policy objectives, especially in regards to Ukraine. I have been recently deleted off of Twitter again for just that. And before that, back in 2019, I was deleted off of Twitter because I was exposing US interference here in Thailand, where I'm based. That's what Twitter does. That's what Facebook does. That's what YouTube does to a large extent. And look who they include in this article. This is interesting. Someone from the Atlantic Council on their Digital Forensic Research Lab. Why is that interesting that they're complaining about people getting involved, this billionaire Elon Musk getting involved with Twitter? Because they're complaining other conservative or politically active billionaires would begin to think seriously about how they could use their fortunes to influence these platforms. Well, these platforms are already being influenced by, say, the Atlantic Council and its membership. Look at this. This was from 2021, last year. This is Ben Nimmo. He's from the Atlantic Council. This is his profile right here. He's also from the Digital Forensic Research Lab. And here's him leaving Graphica, which I'll get into in just a minute, and starting at Facebook. And what's he going to do at Facebook? He's going to be working against influence operations, also known as IO. He's going to join the best IO teams in the world to study, catch, and get ahead of the known players and emerging threats. But that's not what they're actually doing. What they call an information operation is anyone putting information out there that contradicts or challenges the information the US is putting out there to advance their geopolitical objectives. That's all that means. It is, again, it is just ways of dressing up censorship. That's all they're doing. So if you go to Graphica, Ben Nimmo's company, you could see how Graphica had already been working with Facebook. That's why he ended up shifting over to Facebook to just do it directly instead of doing it through Graphica. They were looking at pages that looked like news outlets, but they determined that they weren't news outlets, and they decided to just delete them, because that's what Facebook and Twitter do. They decide who is doing news and who doesn't have a say in anything, who doesn't have their voice heard at all. Now, this goes all the way back. Facebook and Twitter are basically one and the same. I know they're two separate companies. They're two different types of social media platforms, but they're used the exact same way by the exact same people. They are private corporations, technically, but in reality, they work directly with the US government. And whatever the government says, that is what they do. And as you can already see, the pattern developing is all of the sneaky little ways they try to dress it up and make it look like something other than what it actually is, which is government censorship, US government censorship. Now, the problem with Twitter and Facebook is that it's not just US censorship. Twitter and Facebook have monopolized social media around the globe. There's only a handful of countries that have their own alternatives to Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, who have control over their information space, and every other country does not. They depend on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, other US-based social media platforms, and this is what people use to get their news and their information. And because it is a US-based corporation, and because they have this relationship with the government, whatever it is in that country that the US wants to promote gets promoted, and whatever they want to silence and make disappear is silenced and disappears. I know this personally. I'm based in Thailand. Thailand does not have its own social media platforms. They depend entirely on Facebook and on Twitter and on YouTube. And these corporations based in the United States will determine for Thai people what can and cannot be said in their own information space. Thai people have no say whatsoever over it. When the Thai government says that is illegal, you cannot do that in this country, they, the people at Twitter and Facebook take pride in telling the Thai government that they don't care and that they're not going to do it. This is what led China to develop its own alternatives and to phase Facebook, Twitter, and other US-based platforms completely out of their information space, and Russia's doing the same thing. And actually, a lot of countries are starting to think about it in these terms. A country's information space is as important to protect as their airspace, their shores, and their land borders. If you're not protecting your information space in the 21st century, you're not protecting your country at all. If a foreign country can get into the minds of all of your people, no matter how strong your traditional military is, if they're getting inside their heads and telling them that their best interests are not actually their best interests are serving US interests, you can destroy an entire country. And that's what's happened. So let's look at the Arab Spring. Well, first, let's go before the Arab Spring. Let's look at this article from Reuters. This is from 2009. US State Department speaks to Twitter over Iran. So this is an example of the US State Department and Twitter working together to help advance US foreign policy objectives. So the US State Department said on Tuesday it had contacted the social networking service Twitter to urge it to delay a planned upgrade that would have cut daytime service to Iranians who are disputing their election. And then it says down here, Twitter and Facebook have been used as a tool by many young people to coordinate protests over the election's outcome. And then President Barack Obama, who has no say on Iranian elections, said earlier on Tuesday he believed people's voices should be heard and not suppressed in Iran. And because the US State Department determined that Twitter was an important communication tool in Iran, helping contest elections that the US wanted to contest, that's what they did. They delayed their maintenance because the US State Department told them to. So that was 2009. At the same time, and probably without most people realizing it, Facebook and Twitter and all of these other US-based tech companies were already working with the State Department for doing exactly that, not just delaying maintenance schedules, but helping these, youth activists organize against their governments, and organize against their governments in a way that served US foreign policy objectives. Had nothing to do with the best interests of the people in these countries. These people were proxies, they were funded, they were trained, they were goaded by the US to do these things. And this is how the whole Arab Spring was kicked off. Now, this is from an organization called Alliance of Youth Movements, and this is how they were training these people. This was from 2008. New York City, and they did this every single year. And I want you to look through who all of the people involved were. These are people from Facebook, they were from Google, but they were also from the US State Department. Right here, there's a whole section with everyone from the US State Department, including Jared Cohen. They were all there. They were there to train these activists that they were also funding and equipping to go back to their respective countries and overthrow their respective governments. This was in 2008. They did this every single year until the Arab Spring. In 2011, these groups involved in these activities with the US State Department and US tech giants. They were the ones out in the streets leading these mobs, serving as cover for armed groups the US had also been preparing ahead of time to divide and destroy all of these countries from North Africa to the Middle East, and kick off this geopolitical reordering of the entire region. They started 3 major wars. Libya, where the US directly intervened militarily, destroyed the country, and it is destroyed to this day. Syria, where the US also militarily intervened and now illegally occupies a third of the country. East of the Euphrates River, and also Yemen, declared by the UN the worst humanitarian crisis on Earth today. On the New York Times in 2011 even admitted it. US groups helped nurture Arab uprising, and not only did they admit that the National Endowment for Democracy and its subsidiaries, including the National Democratic Institute and Freedom House, not only did they help train and fund these opposition groups, but they also mentioned Facebook and Google by name. So they said some Egyptian youth leaders attended a 2008 technology meeting. That is the PDF that I just showed you. They went to this technology meeting where they were taught to use social networking and mobile technologies to promote democracy. Among those sponsoring the meetings were Facebook, Google, MTV, Columbia Law School, and the State Department. And then just go back to this article about the US State Department and Twitter working together in 2009 in Iran. They were saying that Twitter and Facebook have been used as a tool by many young people to coordinate protests, because that's what they were trained to do by the US State Department. And all of this continues to this day. So this was just last year, 2021. Milk Tea Alliance. Twitter creates emoji for pro-democracy activists. So this is a modern-day Arab Spring that they're trying to get going here in Asia. Twitter has launched a new emoji for the Milk Tea Alliance, a movement uniting Asian pro-democracy activists. The alliance has brought together anti-Beijing protesters in Hong Kong and Taiwan with pro-democracy campaigners in Thailand and Myanmar, and they all have 2 things in common. They're all funded by the US government through the NED, just like during the Arab Spring, and they all hate China. That's what the US government is helping support, and of course, that is what US tech giants like Twitter are helping support. This is foreign interference. This is the weaponization of social media, and this is information war. Elon Musk thinking he's going to go buy Twitter and de-weaponize it. I think it's incredibly naive. I think he's setting himself up for a much bigger fight than he ever realized. So I expect a whole host of measures used to stop this, from them blocking his bid to buy it, a media campaign against him, and then eventually I think it'll get legal, if not physical. I keep hearing people talk about Elon Musk and maybe possibly cleaning up Twitter. When you understand that Twitter is not just a private corporation with bad policies, but it is a weapon used by the US government in information warfare, a weapon to establish and maintain dominance over another nation's information space and manipulate the public against their own best interests all around the world, and how this is key to encircling and containing not just Russia, but also China in places like Southeast Asia, where I am based. When you understand all of that, you understand how no one is going to allow such a powerful weapon to be taken from them, not without a fight. I just thought I would put that point out there. We just have to wait and see how it unfolds. But just keep that point in mind. And if you thought this video was useful, please like and share. Think about subscribing. It's free to do, and it helps the channel grow. If you're watching this on YouTube, check the video description below for other places you can find my work in case I get deleted off of YouTube. I'm on Odyssey and I'm also on Rumble. I say that because I have been deleted off of Twitter twice now, and I've been deleted off of Facebook before. Also in the video description below will be the links to all of these articles that I just referenced so that you could read them over for yourself. There's also ways in the video description below where you can help support my work. You can do that through Buy Me a Coffee, through Patreon, and through PayPal. To those who have been, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate that. And as always, thank you for watching.